City School Board of Education, meeting at 280 West, 940 North in Provo, Utah. We will begin with a roll call. I'm Jennifer Partridge, Board President.
Gina Hales, Board Vice President.
Melanie Hall, Board Member.
Lisa Boyce, Board Member.
Meg Van Wagenen, Board Member.
Emily Harrison, Board Member.
Tara McCabe, Board Member.
Devin Daly, Business Administrator.
Okay, and we'd like to excuse Superintendent Wendy Dow, who is traveling today. Do we have a motion to start our study session?
I move we start our study session.
Okay, motion made by Board Member Van Wagenen. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Harrison. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we are now in study session, and we will begin with our board member training, and I'll turn it over to Terry.
Is it possible to put... Oh, okay, good. I'm not gonna go through the whole thing. I'm gonna let you read it on your own. And the public, I just want to make sure people who are confused on Provo Forward understand that the school board is a separate entity from the city council, and the board only hires the superintendent and the business administrator. We also evaluate the superintendent and business administrator before we decide to continue or not continue their employment contract. And if anyone has questions about this, please contact your school board member.
All right.
Great. There's links.
You get the award for being so efficient. That's awesome. And thorough but quick. So, do any board members here have any questions or things to add? Okay.
Thanks, Terry.
Thanks, Terry.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on to the next item then, which is our Community Connections Committee. So they've been meeting for the last few months, and Devin is going to present to us some of the feedback that they've been sharing, so that we have that.
So most of the feedback kind of revolves around two different topics. One is, our employee retention and our salaries. Our first meeting, we sat with them and explained to them the salary gap that we were trying to close between teachers and classified and our administrators. So, we've done pretty good. I mean, with the work with our teachers and our education support professionals this year, we were able to bring our first year teacher salaries with the state supplement of the educator salary enhancement to just over 60,000, almost 61. So that's great. Not quite what we want to do long term, but we want to make sure that we're evaluating all of our expenses, because one of the things that the first question I get from people when they ask about taxes is, what are you cutting in order to make this work? And so we want to make sure that we've evaluated everything and see if we actually need what we're asking for. So that was, and then this year we also made a big push to close that gap of the administrator salaries, which we talked about last year as well. So we discussed this with the Community Connections group, and they were very appreciative of what we'd done. One of the things, the other piece of that came up was, how do we retain employees that are not financial? So what other benefits can we offer? They gave a lot of ideas, like access to the rec center and discounts to restaurants in Provo, and one of the big things was creating a space for affordable housing for teachers is in Provo. That was a couple of community members' suggestions. And then making sure that information is accessible to all of the new hires. So when you look at a couple of things I don't think people recognize is the city does give us a 25% discount to the Provo Rec Center on the resident rate for a membership. And so even if they don't live so I actually take advantage of that, and it costs me for a family membership about $30 a month, which is less than what a resident or definitely a non-resident pays. And so that's something that I don't think a lot of people are taking advantage of or even know about. There's other things like restaurants. We could work with partnerships on some of those restaurants and provide that information. I know there are some places that actually do provide discounts, but maybe they just don't know, or we don't have a list put together. So then put together, yep, absolutely, and so put together something so that they know what the maybe non-financial pay, but financial benefits are for working in Provo. So that's one of the other options, and then just making sure that we're consistently talking about it, and so that they know, because I think when they started the partnership with the rec center, it was pretty well advertised for the first month, but I don't know that it's ever been talked about since then.
We've had incentives with Vasa Fitness as well.
Yeah, Vasa
Took
Fitness.
that feedback from the group to better advertise.
And Vasa actually is part of our the onboarding and part of the benefits pack. So when you go and sign up for your benefits, that's one you can sign up for at any time. It's not one that's just once a year, and that's a pretty good deal for that monthly amount. So maybe making that just a little bit more accessible and a little bit more of a base knowledge so that people understand what those benefits are. The second piece of the conversation in this last meeting was about communication. Caleb's favorite topic. And so there was a couple of things that we were trying to get information from. And one of the pieces of information was, how do we get like really good news out to people? I think Caleb and Wendy do an awesome job with the video cast, with their communications that go out to employees. But the Community Connections Committee didn't feel like it was as widely known, that they don't know. And so we asked, well, how would you look at the information? I mean, there are people that are not on social media, and so it's a great way for those people that are very connected that way, but it's not a great way for some of those residents who don't know. I mean, they hear things about the school district and they don't really know the reality of what is happening. So how do we get some of that information out to the public? And some of their ideas were, provide information for principals to share at those school events. They have a math night, and you have the successes and things from that school. Utilize the Daily Herald more effectively. I don't remember the last time I got a newspaper on my porch, but people still do, and that could be some of that target audience that don't necessarily look at social media.
Or would it be going to like a school at a principal's welcoming or something?
And there are a lot of people in the community. I mean, they talk in their community. So one of the suggestions was be more involved in the what are they called? Neighborhood meetings. Thank you. So the neighborhood meetings that they have, and make sure that whoever's in those neighborhoods goes to those meetings and shares. Right. I mean, who doesn't want to talk about Provost and Westridge and how great they did in their achievement in their testing this year and the amount of growth that they had?
Well, this is helpful because at least in our district, we are there most meetings, between the three of us. But I don't know if we're as good about saying like, hey, these are these things we can celebrate, right?
Yeah.
Well, I often say, what do you want to hear about? They tell me what they want to hear about, so I guess we could slip it in.
But we can add it too,
they give me 5 minutes to cover 2 hours worth of material.
Yeah, it is.
And you're usually at the very end.
My
when
district
everybody's
doesn't
there.
usually ask, and so sometimes I'm like, you want? Oh, not this time, right?
Yeah, and
We're
so
kind of
some
in
of
between.
the neighborhood.
I kind of put mine in the public comment part.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. In
Well,
district.
and a couple of the people who had been neighborhood chairs were at the meeting and said, we just have taken them off the agenda so many times that we just don't check as often.
Yeah.
And so I think
that's
that's
true, that's happening.
that's
Yeah.
part of what, us being a little bit more proactive and making sure that we get on those agendas.
And I like the idea that it would be some talking points that somebody prepares that then we can all take, because right now it's just whatever each board member wants to say.
I was gonna say, I think that
That a
unifies the
cohesive-
message of what's.
And then the whole city's
said
hearing the
too,
same
yeah.
message over those 6 weeks or 2 months, whatever it is.
I have very like.
Yeah, you do a great job, Gina.
Well, that's not what I'm saying, they ask me to present on specific things, so I can take whatever the message is, but that might not be what they're wanting to hear.
Well, and
could
I
add-
think
it
it's
could be in
still,
addition to.
I think it's still important to address the things that they want to hear, because those are neighborhood specific.
Yeah.
And that's really important to make sure that we're addressing that, where we're not pigeonholing every neighborhood into all of the neighborhoods.
No, and I
right?
agree, but, and I don't know about other people's districts, but the three that I'm,
Five?
No, how many am I think it's just two, that I cover,
Yes,
two.
there's 5 districts.
They don't, and mine go into two different ones, but, there is not enough time to do both. I will tell you, trying to get, to fit in what they want to hear does not work, so I feel like I would love to have a main message, but.
Maybe those main messages could also be shared through, they send follow-up emails to their neighborhoods after those meetings, and here are our notes, here are our links.
That's a great idea.
So whether we have time to present them or not, they could still also go out that way,
Absolutely,
right?
that's a great idea.
What if we had a flyer that we could hand out at the meeting?
And that was another idea that they came up with, or more QR codes that people could scan. Now, I'm still trying to teach my mother, who's almost 80, how to scan a QR code, and so again, we want to make sure that we're not hitting, it's a terrible word, but impacting all of the people in the city, and some of those will not have those skills. So I want to make sure that well, we all want to make sure that is taken care of.
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Yes.
Just to Gina. Which meeting are you going to that this is?
Neighborhood
like,
district, the neighborhood.
So the meeting's down at the
So
city?
we
Yes.
share,
Oh,
and we
okay.
share a district. Is that
So
right?
the ones that I'm in are 4 and 5.
And I'm
So
4
I'm
and
also
1.
in 4.
You're
and 3.
4 and.
Is that right?
Yeah, and I'm 3 and 5.
You're 3 and 5. Okay.
So we
Got it.
we should
Or
just
anybody
communicate
in
over
one or two.
email
I'm
around
in
a
one, we're
rotation
both in one.
schedule, so that
Oh,
we're
Megan
not
and I are
So
in
one
same
of us
class.
at least goes to
Yeah.
each one. Okay.
And reaches out to
Got it.
Rachel ahead of time to say, hey, could we take 5 minutes on the agenda and just
Got
give
it.
a school
Some
board
of the-
update?
Yeah.
Okay.
And or if you have a specific question you'd like us to respond to, let us know in advance. Sometimes they'll just say no. I mean, if they have a lot of developers on there and other
Yeah.
items of business, they're like, we cannot
I've been told not
add
to.
that, which is fine.
And that's what you're saying. You
But
just go on
then
your
we
public
just
comment?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
and or we give them something to put in their minutes, because they do send those out and they put them on their neighborhood Facebook
And a
groups and
flyer,
emails
if we
and
did a little flyer
Yeah.
with the info on it for the people when they walk in the door,
Yeah.
I like
Okay.
that.
And that brings up another suggestion that they had, was putting it in the utility bills as a mailers, because everybody in the city gets a utility bill. The problem with that is the city uses a company to do that, and the cost of that would likely be prohibitive to enter one in every one of the utility bills, because then it would also go to all of the apartments that, that those residents of the apartments don't necessarily need to know what's happening at the school district, but I mean, that is one of the things that
When we
that
send
talk
our
about.
school newsletter though, doesn't it go to?
It goes to all residents.
Every
Mhm.
resident, yeah.
And that was one of the things, they did talk about making the newsletter a little bit more, what's the word that was used? Jared, were you there when they talked about?
They're
Was
trying to be
maybe
tactful.
more, what?
They're trying to be tactful.
No, they were trying to, I want to be tactful,
Like,
because I think
thought it was
everybody does a
great.
great job. Oh, it
I
does.
know, I liked it.
They just felt like it was, it's a
serious?
little boring,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word. I am not, this is not a.
You're just the messenger.
I'm just a messenger.
Okay.
And since I'm like the queen of boring, I really don't think I have
You are
much to
fun.
say about
F-U-N.
boring. I just want to make sure at the, anyway, just
Okay,
there,
no, fair enough.
there's,
We
that
can
they
look at
wanted, so they're like, make it more like the library newsletters. I don't know what the library newsletters.
I can only find them
But that's only
online.
online.
So
You're the
anyway,
messenger.
so I am the last person who's gonna make anything fun
Are
or
they trying
look
to say
great.
more
So-
colorful? Like splash of
Well,
pink
you,
or
maybe a
something?
little more lighthearted, right? Like, I don't know if hard is the right way, but it is very business, professional, and maybe for some people, all those words and everything turns them off quickly.
Well, and I think the committee was very, very open to helping. So it's not all relying on the school
Right.
board or on the district staff. They really want to be part of the solution and part of getting that information
Signing up
out.
for it, right.
Because one of the library newsletter,
Yeah, I'm signing up for it right now. You can sign
I
up.
I get a library email,
Ah,
like once a
me too,
week,
but this is-
but I don't think that's the newsletter.
Keep going.
Anyway, no, that's totally fine. It's a squirrel moment. We do have
It
that
was
on a regular
very
basis.
sorry.
So, but that is what they were looking at, you know, making it a little bit less,
Great.
I guess probably wordy is a good word.
Okay.
As,
Should make it like the IKEA instructions, with pictures. That anyone in any language.
Okay, what?
that could work.
No idea it's a bad idea.
Maybe that one was.
All right, we've got a few minutes left. Devin, thank you for sharing that with us, and we've got the write-up here as well. If you guys have any questions, this is a time for that, but also Wendy wanted us to also give suggestions on what else would we like this committee to talk about in their next few meetings. So, what thoughts do you guys have about that, or any follow-up questions to what the feedback we received today?
I have a question about like who's coming to this? Is it all over the district? Like how
there are people
how
from all over the district.
Okay.
So we have
and
quite
mostly
a
older?
no.
We tried to get a mix.
There's
Mix
a
of
couple
age.
older. I would like to don't like to call myself middle-aged, but more middle-aged.
Okay.
There's some that don't have students in our system
Uh-huh.
yet.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which
So
is helpful.
it's a pretty large mix, people whose grandkids come, you know, so there are a large variance.
And is the attendance, everyone is coming to each meeting, like the same people,
18
so
to
that?
24.
Yeah, 18 to 24 every time. I mean, there's
Right, I was
always,
curious
it's
if
never
they still-
perfect
if
attendance,
people-
but for the most part, it's well attended. Most of the seats are full by the time it's over.
Seems like Wendy, after having a meeting, I'll hear her say things like, "Oh my gosh, we just had a good meeting and got
Yeah.
some great ideas." Like it feels like so far it's meeting purpose that we set out when we
And
designed
they
this a few
do have
months ago.
some great ideas, and like with the truth in taxation, they said, you know, if you have something that you can send to people about the why and you know what you're doing, those are things that they would be totally willing to help share and provide that information.
That's great.
So Wendy's planning on providing communication to them over the summer to give updates, and so
So
she's
what
awesome
do we
with
want
that.
them to also study or give us feedback on? I've got a couple ideas, but I want to hear what you guys have.
Go ahead, you should.
Well,
Yeah.
two of our big things coming up, and I don't know if we have enough ready for them to start on right away, but as we're talking now about looking at how we run our dual language immersion programs and how maybe we could adjust it to make them function better, but also we need feedback, and this is probably also for the other parent group,
Yeah.
right?
Committee, right.
How people would utilize it if we changed things, right?
Change locations or
Yeah,
something like that.
as well as, I don't think we're ready for this one yet, but the Dixon site, and a CTE school and those kinds of things, so I do want to get some of their thoughts on that.
Yeah.
And we've got community emails though on what they would like us to do at the Dixon site, right?
Yeah.
But is the rest of the
Lots
community
of-
on board with the we're starting to get kind of a, most people are saying do this with it, right? But does the rest of the community feel that way, or is that just the neighborhood?
So a couple questions that I had related to this. One is around, you know, as we're developing and going through the process of approving the budget, people do have opinions, and I know we've asked very thoroughly our employees around priorities, et cetera, but I think it would be interesting, and maybe you already had that conversation with the committee around like trade-offs and costs, and you know what I mean, like
Well, one of the suggestions
priorities
that they
of
had was,
spending.
you know, putting a dollar value, because the survey that went out had, you know, would you like to keep this, and how do you
Yeah.
feel about this? But if they knew that this program cost 1.1 million to keep and this one cost 1.2 million to keep, would they be as interested? That was one of the suggestions that they made on a budget level.
Same thing when we talk to the community at large. I mean, I know especially around dual language immersion, a lot of people in the community would like a chance again to give some input.
Yeah.
They didn't understand why some of the questions were being asked and so if we did something like that, I do think sometimes it's helpful to kind of say like some of that information out, right, around the costs and things. But I just wondered if they had given input around, because I do feel like I hear that from community members a lot around, you know, how efficient we're being, and they'll hear, or there will become a talking point around, you know, district spending at the district office versus teachers the side. Like some of those things I think would be great to have that conversation and give real information in that committee around any questions that they're hearing. Do you know what I'm saying? Because sometimes I do feel like there are narratives that grow, but they're not always based on real information. So if there are those kinds of narratives, I would hope the committee would be a way you would hear them and be able to like think about and respond and answer questions they have around priorities and spending.
Yeah, and we can certainly have that discussion with them about I mean, one of the things that we could do is the budget presentation that we'll do that has a little bit more detail in a couple weeks, and breaking it down by what's in each of those functions and how much those things cost. I think that's the kind of information that they need, but I think it's the same thing with the discussion of DLI or music or any of those. You're going to have people who are very strongly against it and very strongly for it. And so we want to frame what we're talking about priorities. What are the priorities? And having that actually labeled with a dollar amount might be helpful in making those.
But giving them some of that budget information, I feel like that's a group that it would be great to present that to. And then they may have.
The only challenge with that this year is we don't meet again until after we approve the FY26 budget. But I think it's a great thing to bring up for the next year, because that's where we're trying to implement some of that change. So getting to it at the beginning of this is what is in the budget, because we weren't getting rid of any programs right now. We just want to make sure that we can sustain what we have going, and then start having the discussion of what do these programs cost and what is the impact and how do we feel like the community feels about it.
Go ahead, Gina.
I had a couple things. I already sent them to Wendy in an email. Would it be good to?
Yeah,
I thought it was put out here right now.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if we're ready for this either, but I would be interested to know portrait of a graduate. What does the community envision a graduate to look like? What do our businesses want or need from graduates? And the community, what do they want or need from graduates? And then the second thing is, how can we build better, more community and stakeholder partnerships, which I think you've already kind of talked about.
And we talked about that.
And what would it look like? Okay.
I think that's great. I think those are great ideas. And we can always send things to the Community Connections Committee over the summer so they can review it. So that when they come in August, they can ask specific questions or come back with some of that feedback.
Anybody else have anything that they wanted to bring up? All right, if you think of something later, do what Gina did and email Wendy. So, awesome. All right, next we're going to item F. We are going to have an update on the Timpview High School construction plans, architectural plans.
Okay, so do you want to
Devin.
bring up the document, and I
as she's pulling that up, so tomorrow Gina and Melanie and Devin and I and Wendy will be in meeting with the architects again. They presented this to us at our last meeting, and then we wanted feedback from everybody. So if there is any feedback today, we can bring that to them tomorrow. But then after that, then we move forward on where we're at after that. So go ahead.
So these are the renderings of the outside of the building. This is the proposed new main entrance once the main office is done. If you go to the next page, the proposal was to do the lit, or you can control the brightness. One of the issues with this was Mommy did not like the idea of having anything lit on the school. She felt like the neighborhood would not like having anything lit. So that was one of the concerns. Also,
Probably right.
Yeah,
on
I
that
just
was the
put some of those lights.
THS. There's other schools that have THS, so she didn't want to do THS there, because Timpanogos High School and some of the other schools across Salt Lake and Utah Valley have THS. And so one of her suggestions was T-birds, which I think is too big or too many letters, but it's also something that we can talk about. And then, so that there were a lot of, we love most of the outside. There were some great things. So if you want to go to the third page, this is the area that is there on that north side. So you can see the new entrance back by where now you go into the new education or the new classroom wing. So over there on the north side. I have to think my north, south, east, west.
Okay.
But that's on the north side, so keep going down. One of the other suggestions, so this is the wall, on the other side of the wall is the yard for the CTE classrooms, or the CTE yard where they can do deliveries of wood and metal and
Art, auto.
Yep, auto, art, performing arts, all of that will be
And this is on
in
what
that
side
area.
of the school?
That is on the southwest corner.
Okay, thank you.
Can I bring up?
On to
I think
feedback.
somebody
On
was
to
asking
feedback.
me, it may have been you, Lisa, the lack of windows here. And
Well,
I
this
think-
is the shop area, right?
Right,
So
and I
this-
think the shop people did not want windows.
Correct.
So-
And on that south wall as well, then, going beyond that wall,
The orange wall you're talking?
below the T,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
that wall also, we don't need any windows.
So
there.
we'll
We talked about adding a window though.
No, we talked about
Or
adding
set.
some windows a little bit higher. I think they were bringing that back to us tomorrow. One of the other concerns that Momi had was just the T on the, so that's the auditorium. And she wanted more of the 3D relief of the T-bird image rather than the T that's like Provo High. So if you look at Provo High, you've got the bulldog on the outside of the building. So that's one thing that, and we'll talk about all of this tomorrow. I just wanted everybody to be aware so that you knew that Momi had seen it and she had been able to give some feedback on it. So that's the nighttime again. We'll talk about not having anything lit on the outside of the school.
I think when the being lit part from our meeting it was brought up that maybe we could outline the T for other
Like
homecoming
Right.
or
Graduation.
Or if graduation or big events or something big happens, you can light the T, but it wouldn't be on all the time.
I was gonna say, she doesn't want anything lit, right?
Yeah, but having something temporary that's not on all night, but it's a special thing, I think that was the concern, was something that was always on. And one of the other concerns was when a light bulb goes out, then it's just gonna look terrible. And I think our maintenance staff is pretty good about replacing light bulbs, but.
The
and
architect guy told me the pen they use now, they'll last forever.
yeah, the LED lights do last forever. So, all right, let's go down to the next one. This is a little bit of a higher view of that northwest side, sorry, of where the current classroom wing is and where the performing arts is right now. That's where it will come out of.
Yeah, that's the bus.
Yeah, currently it's the bus area. That is not going to be the bus area, that's the parent drop off.
No, this is.
And we're gonna do the bus up around on the east side, right now, like where the
this is
CTE
not
area
right.
is.
Correct.
By
Now-
by the seminary.
Yep.
Our buses are still right now in the northeast, mostly.
So they'll be over on the northeast rather than on the northwest. And then that's just a view of that north or the southwest corner.
So this is the stadium on the very far right of the picture?
That is
Yes.
the gym right there, and then on the very far right next
Behind
to
that.
that is the
Okay.
gym. Correct.
Okay, yep.
And I believe that's the last one. So that's they're wanting to kind of bring in, one of the things we talked about was bringing in some of that the checkered brick look that's on the other areas, so it just kind of cohesively brings together all the sides of all the pieces of the school.
So it doesn't look like a prison wall.
There is that.
Shouldn't it say phase 2 rebuild?
It does say phase 2, it's just
Oh,
2
sorry.
and
I don't have my glasses.
yeah, it's in the it's not phase 11. Although it feels like phase 11.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a reason they call it Roman
No, they're calling this phase 2.
Okay, what
So.
feedback or questions do you guys have about this?
Oh, keep
Yeah,
pictures
keep
up
up.
if you can. That's okay.
I was gonna go take notes on your feedback. I will sit back. So are they coming with, do they have already what Momi said and they're gonna come with
I
some?
sent it to them on Saturday afternoon after I got it from Momi, and I've already talked to Dave. He will come tomorrow prepared to talk about it.
Okay.
Lisa, were you raising your hand?
Yeah, I have a couple of, I guess, I'm glad to start to see like a picture of how it's all gonna fit together. I think that's really helpful. I admit that I just looked at it today, so I haven't, like, I would love to put a little more thought into this, but maybe I'll just walk through a couple of my initial impressions around this. Like if you start at the very top slide here, I think that's where we are, right now. I'm glad to hear that maybe we don't light that up. I just felt some concern around that with the neighborhood, and I think there's a way you can have lights go onto that. Do you know what I'm saying? Without it being the backlit.
Okay.
And then if you go down to the third one, oh no, sorry, fourth one. Yeah, on this one I had a couple of ideas / questions. I know that I can totally understand the reason for that brick wall and that they're using the brick to tie into where it kind of got that same brick around. I wondered two things. One, I just wondered about the medium. I feel like it would look nicer if that were a darker colored, and possibly even there are privacy fencing options that aren't just solid plain brick that might just look better, and or maybe some like landscape design that we really commit to before we agree to do a wall like this that are going to break that up. So I just did a quick search on like, so that I was giving an actual suggestion and not like just pointing out problems. Like arborvitae, use or laurels, euonymus, like things that are evergreen that break that up with some landscaping that's really intentional that we are going to keep alive. Because then that also, it breaks up the vision of just the visual of that solid wall. It looks nicer, and also it prevents potential graffiti or problems like that I think just a solid wall kind of might invite. And yeah, like I looked up a couple of alternative fencing options. Maybe they're not as sturdy though as that brick. So
I wonder if it's a
architect, I don't know.
safety
Yeah.
thing for those classes.
Yeah.
All
Sure.
for that yard where they have all of the deliveries and,
Yeah.
and people working. That's
So if it doesn't need to be brick and it needs to be that red brick, then I would say let's plant some things and make it part of the plan and not pour concrete up to it, for example, then, and make sure we have irrigation where we need it before we start, so that it's not like later even more expensive to go back in and try to add that. Like that should then I think be an intentional piece of that planning.
Lisa, I like what you're saying there, and as you were talking, also I envisioned like even with the wall, like they have little brick columns every
Yeah,
you know
sometimes
8,
you can
10,
break that
12
up,
feet,
yes,
right?
with
And
a
so
little
it breaks it up,
architectural
makes
feature.
it, yeah.
Or something.
That would help
just something
too.
to help that I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, Gina.
So that was comment, and then if you go to the next, sorry you guys, I'll be done soon.
Gina, did you have a comment?
Oh,
for
go
Lisa?
ahead, Gina. Yeah.
No, I was just gonna ask, did you mean, when you said landscaping, do you mean landscaping instead of a wall or landscaping outside of the wall?
Just like trees
Against
or
the wall,
something
right?
against
So
the
the wall is there, but visually and part of the plan is to see kind of that.
Trees, bushes.
Yeah, and it also just prevents, I think, it from being such an easy target and from being an interesting target because you have something growing in front
Yeah,
of it.
that's great. I was just double checking.
And then as you go down to the next slide, oh, sorry, the one below that, I think it is. Yeah, on this, oh, sorry, I lied, the one below that, you guys, I'm sorry, on 7. Yeah, on this one. So I'll just show you a couple of suggestions that I had. I like this darker gray, and I'm glad that they're pulling in kind of all the parts, the new classroom part, etc., with the different materials they're using. I wondered about using some of this darker gray though along this wall and on this face here, that I think it might look a little nicer than, do you know what I mean, in between the variegated, I don't know what you're going to call that, where the bricks are, the sprinkles or the glitter bricks right here in these columns. Like, I just wondered if we could see what it would look like with that being a darker color, just on some of these surfaces, because I think that might look nicer than that lighter brick. I don't think you're going to see like visually the school tip, even though I know that that classroom wing is mostly that lighter brick. But I actually think it will just aesthetically look better, maybe, to consider putting a different facade on some of those walls. Anyway, that's a personal suggestion, but like I colored it in quickly at home and thought, I just think it looks nicer, that's all. But I'd love to see what other people think of that.
And which way's cheaper?
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
So is there still, so we went to a lacrosse game here and we parked, I think, right here. Is there still going to be parking down? Okay.
Yeah, there won't
Oh,
be parking
not
right
right there.
Yeah,
No.
not there, on
Not
the
there.
other side of the wall.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, well, just that's the baseball field. Are the tennis courts right here? Tennis courts.
It's
are
all
right
gonna
there.
be closer
So
to the street.
they're
It's
in the
all
front.
Yeah.
here.
More that way. Okay.
Yeah.
Just check.
Yeah.
And then some around the back.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions or feedback?
I'll
Meg.
ask, 'cause I think I saw these in the notes about bike racks. Where will those be oriented? They should be close to the front of the school.
Yes.
So, yeah, we were
Yes.
talking
Yeah,
about
go
that
back up
though.
to
Or
the-
somewhere
we
that's
go back to
convenient. They
number
shouldn't
one.
be like
On
somewhere
the
hidden
first slide.
where people can't find
So
them.
we were talking about that there would
Yeah.
be a
Is
few
there
bike
back
racks
here?
up front here for visitors.
Right, okay, which is really
But
nice.
we didn't really want them to be
Right next to the
right
front.
next to the front.
Sure.
And that they would be scattered amongst the other doorways because they would be coming at
Some of the
different,
students,
most of the
yeah.
students would be coming.
And they can go through those other doors?
At the beginning of the school they can.
Okay.
And at the end of
I
school.
think
Are you
that.
talking on the northeast side then? Like, where are we specifically saying they would go? 'Cause
There would be
we're
some
covered
at-
with the brick wall
There,
down to the doors.
there would be some on northeast, I think, but also we talked about here on the southwest, the ones coming up Timothy
Right.
Drive from the south might wanna enter in, especially in the cooler months, right? They might wanna enter in down at the south end of the building.
But there is
walk
an
inside.
entrance, a southwest
Yeah.
entrance?
Can you
Down
show
by
that
the
to
band
us?
and
Go
stuff.
back,
Is it on
go down
6 or 7 maybe?
3 or 4. Go 3 or 4, yeah. Or go to 3.
Maybe this won't
That's
be
the
in the
north
discussion
end.
tomorrow.
These
I don't
renderings
know.
don't show that as well, but yes, they're.
This is
The
the north,
west.
so on the northeast side you could put some, there's an
We were
entrance there.
talking about
There-
like any of the entrances,
They'll,
there would be
they'll,
some.
they'll definitely have some.
Yeah,
I
we
did
did
just- we're not
specifically
at the
talk
stage
about-
where we need to pick
about-
out exactly
yeah.
yet, but.
But we talked about that we just don't want them to all be right there at the front. Like, we did say having some for visitors and have them for visitors only.
One of
As
the
long as
things-
there's not like hard to find spots. I mean, there is nothing worse to show up somewhere and you're like, I don't have anywhere to park my bike.
We know,
Right.
like,
And
that's
it's-
been an emphasis with all of our other new
Yeah.
constructions, right? And making sure even all our schools have the bike racks. So we definitely brought it up and we'll.
We
keep
did have a
on that.
discussion. They also discussed if it's not too cost prohibitive to have covered bike
Yes,
parking.
would be really-
But that wouldn't be right in the front, but the
Sure,
kids would
that's
know, we thought maybe the kids would want to park in the covered bike parking.
Yeah.
And that would then draw them there and then not make it, you know what I mean, like they know where it is, but then we'd have the non-covered for
I think it'd be
visitors.
good to see that on the
But
plans.
they were gonna look at it, they were gonna look at
Yeah,
it.
and I do think especially if more kids do ride an e-bike to school and those type of things, covered parking especially for those things would be.
It was a big challenge during COVID when we were really encouraging students to bike here.
Mhm.
It took so long to try to order more bike
Yeah.
racks and to get them here. And so I think it would be helpful to at least see though in the plans where that's gonna go, 'cause
I've got it in my notes.
Right.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anything
'Cause I know-
else before 9 a.m. tomorrow?
Right now, there's, in the front of Shoreline, there's not enough bike parking.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when I came
Kids
there.
don't use where the kids' bike parking supposed to be, they don't use that, they use the
Like
front
the
of the
visitor,
school.
the visitor.
Yeah, and I know when I go on to Timpview, there's that whole bike rack in front of, like right there. It's huge, and there's tons of bikes there, and
Centennial always has tons of bikes.
yeah.
So I just would
Well,
imagine.
they also
We never
moved
have a bike
Centennials
parking.
from, before it was between the,
Right.
it was between the auditorium and cafeteria.
Oh, yeah.
They were all in there, and then they moved them out because it was becoming a problem.
Yeah.
So that's when they moved it out to the front.
And I think visibility is helpful, if it's in,
Yeah.
it's in a spot where people are
More
moving in and
people will
out,
use it.
and there's less like, at least someone, it's still a bike.
So the plan is to have multiple locations, so, yeah. All right, so let's move on to our, item G, our Wasatch update.
So I don't have a lot to report because they're still doing all of their digging into the situation. So we did hire a third party, Langen Consulting. They are more of a national/international company that does the geotechnical studies and soil studies. So they are in the process of doing all of the evaluation. They've asked for the permission to do a couple of borings. Right now the issue is drilling companies. This is a time of year where it's really hard to get them on site, and so they're going to try to work with AGEC, who's already doing some of the borings, to see if they can utilize their machines and have one of their engineers come and do the actual soil evaluation and what that will look like. So once we get those borings done, there's a couple of things that they're concerned about just with that sheer face of the wall being exposed. And so talking about possibly digging a little bit more of that out so it's more sloped, so there's less of a chance of erosion on that part of the wall. And then just evaluating right now they know that there was no drainage zone behind the wall. Or below the wall, and so right now the reconstruction that is being recommended by IGES does recommend a drain system. We just want to make sure that that is sufficient for the water that is behind the wall. So they're still looking at what the water content is, which is why they're doing the extra borings and just doing that study. AGEC is also doing their study right now. They're focusing on the back wall, and by the back wall I mean the one that's next to the field, and so they're looking at that. And we should have I love working with contractors and hate working with contractors at the same time because they have their own time frame, which does not match my time frame. But we've been double checking with them fairly regularly, timeline. Langen did provide me with what the timeline would look like once they get those borings and the study done, and that would be 1 to 2 weeks of evaluating everything, and then a week to provide us with a final report. So the time waiting right now would be when we can get a drilling company out to do those borings. Yes.
And they're not just looking at water, though, they're also looking at compaction. Is that right?
Yeah, they're looking at all of that. Yeah, which is why they're doing the boring.
Okay,
so.
great.
Okay. Any other questions?
Are we still in talks about financial stuff, like how we're going to figure
Oh,
it out?
absolutely. Until we know what was missed, or if anything was missed, they've asked me for the retainage, or at least half the retainage. I've said no until we get this resolved. The guilt trip wasn't working, so they were saying, well, our subcontractors won't get paid, and I said, well, then you can use your current cash to pay your subcontractors. This is a lot of your parts, and so they know, and they're supportive, hesitantly supportive of it, but we don't want to release that retainage until we actually have where the responsibility lies. So once we get all of the reports, we can determine what that was. I mean, part of this is the fact that there was no drain behind the wall or below the wall. That's probably an oversight in the design, but I don't know. I'm not a soil engineer or any kind of engineer except for a money engineer, I guess, or a lack of a better, yeah, I could be a money engineer. But that's where we are right now on that piece of it. So.
Right, because we're still, that question for that behind the wall drainage is kind of hinging on, well, regardless if there was groundwater or not, it's clear that there's water on the site in the past, right now, right, and that may be a problem because no drainage. Also, we're looking at the compaction, right, there's all these factors, but if it was an oversight in the engineering, I guess, sorry, I'm just trying to articulate that I'm on the same page.
So in the discussions that we had with Hogan, we talked about the fact that you know, they're our representative. We hired them as our construction manager. It was a CMGC contract. So he asked if he could bring the other parties, and I said, no, you're our representative, and if there's an issue with the other parties that you hired, that would be your responsibility at that point. So once we get an idea, we really don't have an idea at this point in time of who's responsible or who will be financially responsible. Now, if there were drains that should have been put in, you know, there's a debate of that's something that we should have paid for to begin with, and so do we pay for that portion? It depends on who you talk to.
Sure.
There are people who say, well, it should have happened at the beginning, but that would have been an increased cost to us.
But as of right now, we weren't given that option to say, to opt into that increased cost. Right.
No.
So, okay.
No. So, we're still in that process, so.
And remind me, when will AGEC be kind of done with their
Probably the same time frame.
Okay.
Jim, our
Yeah.
AGC, just was out of town for last week.
Okay.
So he's getting back into work. I have not gotten an update from him.
Okay.
We'd called and asked, and left a message and had not heard anything back from him yet.
Okay. Okay.
Again,
Thank you.
they're not working on my time frame, unfortunately.
But yeah, but clearly both those, AGC, who we hired finishing theirs, our third party, that information will give us
Correct.
some more, it'll help us know
So we have
what needs to be done
the
to solve the
suggested
problem.
fix from IGE.
Yes.
AGC is going in and looking at what the problems are within that build, or you know, and making sure that all of the walls are sturdy, and then Langen comes in and just reviews everything. So the plan, the study, you know, they're on site looking at and doing the observation and studies, and so we're looking at it from all the different directions. So.
Thank you.
The public drives by and says, what's happening? Nothing's happening, but really, a lot of things are happening.
A lot of things are happening.
We're doing our due diligence.
Hogan is still on site. They did a boring on the east side to look, and were able to confirm that there wasn't any large amount. There's water, but not as much. And so they're constantly really trying to find out what the cause of this was, so they can help in any way get this wrapped up, because I think they're as anxious for it to be finished as we are.
Sure.
So.
Okay. Thank you for that update. And now we will turn it back to it's the Devon Show today.
It is a Devon Show today.
For a large purchase request.
So the large purchase request that we have is just the HVAC maintenance. It's part of our regular budget, but they're larger purchases. So one is for Canyon Crest. There was significant damage to some of those HVAC units from the hail. So we are pursuing an insurance claim on those pieces so that it is reimbursed. We don't have word whether they will cover that or not. And then the other one, Timpanogos, yes. So some replacement of some of the larger rooftop units there at Timpanogos. It's just it's time. It's part of the rotation. Part of the original budget, but because it was over $50,000, I just wanted to inform you that this was coming up. So when you see a check, you know what it was for. So they're both with Zion. They will do the removal and the replacement of those over the summer.
Any questions? All right.
See, I can keep us early. It's not always that I'm the one that causes us to be late.
All right, item I, fee schedule update.
Okay, so this is, we're addressing fee schedule again. This is really just the district-wide schedule. The things that changed were we changed that we had the list of every single test. Well, then we discovered there were tests that we didn't have, and we didn't want to necessarily pigeonhole us into specific tests, so we just changed it to a generic testing fee per test. So up to $50 per test, because people were wanting to do the bilingual test and so all different kinds of tests that people were starting to ask us for. So
This isn't including AP testing.
this is not including AP testing. This is just the AP tests are listed separately as a separate fee. So this is just a testing fee for those district tests. And I can clarify that when that we have to do 2 readings. So this is just an informational one, so that we then we'll do a second one on the meeting in June, and I'll clarify that a little bit better.
So it's the third to last line on the left column.
Correct.
Okay.
The other piece of that is right next to that. It is the Utah Online fee for the credit recovery and grade replacement. So this is what has happened, and I know we've talked a little bit about it. This year, the Utah Online, the amount that they pulled back from us has reached $1 million, which is more than it's ever been. And so there are certain places where we're required to approve those courses. Those courses are required for us to approve if it fits within their 8-period schedule. So if they are only in school for 6, if they want to take 2 from Utah Online, that's required. If they want to get ahead, it has to be marked in PowerSchool that they are an early graduate. If it's for that, we will get an additional amount of WPU to cover those additional courses that they will be. It's a prorated amount, but we will get additional WPU funding for that. But what is not required and what has been used for significantly is credit recovery, and John Anderson has been doing a phenomenal job double checking as requests are coming in. So credit recovery and the grade replacement can be denied. We do not have to provide that through Utah Online. And the cost per quarter credit is right around $150 per quarter credit. And we have some of the students that are doing a significant amount of classes, and generally, in a large percentage of the cases, they're for credit recovery because they got an F or they want to get a better grade for their transcripts. So we provide many of those classes through our eSchool, and so rather than having the money go back to the state, we can do it a lot cheaper through ours and not lose that amount per each of the quarter credits. So this fee, we had parents say, well, I want to pay for it. I want my kid to be able to do a grade replacement for this term, and I'll pay for it. But we didn't have anything on our fee sheet that allowed for that. So that the $150 per term is just the amount that we'll be able to charge for those classes if the parent decides, yes, I want to pay for it. I want to have them do this through that Utah Online instead of your eSchool.
And so there are other services besides Utah Online and they're not named here, but would we charge the same fee?
Yes. So the Utah Online is an umbrella of several places that Utah Online has contracted with. Most of the classes are through Utah Online.
But like if you could do Northridge, for example, that's not under Utah Online.
It is not, but there should be a separate fee on there for credit recovery.
Okay, I see, that's for anything else. Credit recovery, okay,
yeah,
perfect.
for those types of
so that
credit,
if you do it another way, we're still able to charge that fee.
We're still able to charge that fee.
Okay.
This is really just the amount of money we've given back to the state this year has just been very painful, and it's mostly come in that last half where they deducted our state revenue because we brought in a little bit more property tax, and maybe not because of property, but because vehicle fees were a little bit higher.
Yeah.
And so they deducted some of our WPU plus $1 million for this, which they say, well, we're not deducting your WPU. I said, well, you have it coded to the WPU code, and it's coming from a state revenue, because it is a negative state revenue. It's not a negative local revenue, and so they their semantics don't match, you know, what's
Reality.
actually happening. But that is the reason for those two changes, so we could be a little bit more flexible for parents that want to pay that $150 charge, because they say that there's equal rigor in the Utah online classes as there is in a regular class at school. Having had a child who did a couple of the classes, I would argue that the rigor is not the same, but it does provide the credit.
Okay. That's helpful.
All right, any questions about the fee schedule?
I have a question about the RISE test. So every student who takes the RISE test pays a fee?
No, that's just for those that we can charge it. So that the purpose of that is
if a homeschool child,
if a homeschool student
would like
or
to take
Utah
it. Got
Kids
it.
All
Okay,
student
thank you.
wants to take the test.
I was
they
like,
can.
wow.
Yeah, but that's
Okay.
the cost of
I was trying to hide that
getting
in
a
my
test
question, but-
license
Got it.
and for the proctoring.
Sure,
of
yeah, that makes sense.
So-
Okay, thank you.
Good. Anything else? All right, we will see this again next month.
Yep, we will see it again in June. I will clarify that a little bit better for you, so.
Okay. Devin, you can take a break. Okay, item J, we're going to review policy 7150 and its procedure, and we're going to turn it over to Caleb.
Okay. So this is the second reading of this. It's been through policy committee, came here a month ago or whatever. We've run it by my department as well as content managers and principals that have been involved with our websites. And so there weren't a whole lot of changes. The main one was we did split it from just a policy to a policy and a procedure. You'll see that most of the procedure is related to the audits that we're asking. There's two different audits, one for the school level and one for my department. And then there were some language changes. So anywhere it said to regularly do something, we added monthly or weekly, depending on what it was. And then we generalized that it needs to adhere to website accessibility guidelines instead of putting it in the specific name, so if it changes we don't have to update it every time. And then on our website we'll always have a link to the most current version of those guidelines. There were a couple other minor things about we updated the definition of content manager based on some feedback from some of our content managers to make it clear that they're only responsible for their assigned schools and not every website on the district or for the district. And then we put a statement in about not advertising other companies and services on our website. We have a separate process that we can send those things out to parents. I think that's all of them, so if there's any questions, happy to answer them.
Questions, comments, liaison?
Thank you for all your work on this. We've seen it a few
Thank you.
times in policy committee and
Yeah.
it's kind of a lot of.
We're excited to have this, it'll help us a lot.
My only thing is, so we took what was all in one policy and moved some of it to procedure, which I think is great. But just I think one where we start the procedure with the word additionally. So if we just get rid of that and say the website quality, blah blah blah.
Yeah, we
I
can
think that will slow down.
make that change.
Okay.
So then we can just make the change to the motion
With
the
changes.
changes
Yep.
discussed in
Yeah.
the study session.
It's the procedure though,
Oh, it is
It's a
procedure, so
procedure.
it doesn't have to be approved.
Yeah, either.
But
Okay. Anything else?
Okay.
All right, thank you, Caleb. You can tell Wendy that you go through policies a lot faster than she does. Granted, we've seen that multiple times. But.
Exactly, it's like, that's my boss.
All right,
I'm
so
not-
we are now at the end of our study session agenda. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn the study session.
Okay, we are, by board member voice, we are now adjourned, and we will start our business meeting right at 6 o'clock in PDC.
Good job, Devin, thanks.
Oh, I have a question for Jared.
No, I stopped it. I did it.
Go team.
not decrease the order of the dinners, so
So we can take our phones, what you're saying. I'll eat it for lunch tomorrow.
The amazing move to the fridge.
Oh,
Did you move it already?
That for me.
Alright, I'll grab mine before we're done. Okay, it's not right out here, that's right. Feedback was great.
Cool. We talked about some similar things in the meeting, especially the southwest. Jennifer was bringing up a lot of that.